Hey everyone, today I'm going to be doing a brief little overview of the Andro Corp crane spec 10 3-inch barrel. But before we do that, I just want to give you guys a little summary of what crane spec is and how it pertains to the 10 3-inch gun. And then we'll kind of do some shooting, run some tests, see if I think it's worth it. Full disclosure, I've already done this before. It is worth it. I just figured I'd take you guys along and kind of explain kind of the thought process behind it all. So anyway, to understand what crane spec is, we first have to understand the relationship of gas port size to dwell time of the 10 3-inch barrel. So if you're familiar with an AR-15, you'll know that when you pull the trigger, the hammer drops, hits the primer, which ignites. Hits the firing pin, which then hits the primer, igniting the powder, sending the projectile down the barrel. So as that projectile is traveling down the barrel, there are gases that are traveling behind it. What dwell time is when your bullet passes the gas port on the barrel, which then allows gas to flow up through the gas port into the gas tube, down into the system to cycle the gun. Dwell time is the amount of time between the bullet passing that gas port and exiting the barrel. So basically the amount of time that the system has to cycle gas through and cycle the gun. On a 10 3-inch gun, a 10 5-inch gun, that's a very specific amount of time because it is such a short dwell time. So basically, once that bullet leaves the barrel, the system depressurizes. So you only have so much time that you can allow gas to go into the system to cycle. If that gas port is too big, you put too much gas into the system, which increases your cyclic rate, and it also is going to cause premature wear on parts and components, which I'll talk about that, and I'll show some photos on this particular gun a little bit later. Anyway, so if that gas port size is too small, you don't get enough gas and you run into cycling issues, whether it's short stroking, whatever it might be. Basically, the gun is not reliable. Now, the issue with such a small dwell time is that when you introduce a suppressor, like a traditional baffle stack type suppressor, what you're doing is essentially you're actually increasing the dwell time on the gun. So what happens is on a 10 3-inch gun, your gas port size has to be a certain size in order to get the correct amount of gas back into the system. So it's pretty easy to do that on an unsuppressed 10-3, 10-5 gun, but when you introduce that suppressor, you're increasing the dwell time and therefore increasing the amount of time that gas is allowed to cycle through the gun. So on a standard 10-3, 10-5 barrel that isn't crane spec, what happens is the gun is just way overgassed. The gun will basically beat itself to death, and you'll get a lot of gas back to the face, which is uncomfortable. So what a crane spec is they actually reduced the gas port size to 0.07, and what that does in relation to adding a traditional baffle stack suppressor, it creates that kind of the perfect harmony of what you need to cycle the gun reliably, not have it beat itself to death, and just be more pleasant overall. Really, on a traditionally suppressed 10-3, 10-5 gun, the crane spec barrel is kind of a must-have. So to give a little bit further example, and I'll throw some photos in here if I remember, but this used to have a Roscoe barrel in it. Great barrel, nothing wrong with it, but it did have a standard size gas port. So with my particular suppressor that I had on this, which was a Dead Air Sandman, basically it was introducing too much gas into the gun, and I wasn't having reliability issues, but I was going to be having longevity issues. So some of the issues that I was having was when gas travels down through the gas tube into the gas one of the issues that was happening was I was getting carrier tilt. If you're not familiar with carrier tilt, is basically when I throw this here. So the gas comes into the gas key, and basically when there's too much gas coming, that bolt is unlocking from the chamber so quickly and so violently that the carrier itself is actually wanting to kind of rock and tilt backwards. And so what happens is the rear of the carrier starts impacting your actual receiver or buffer tube extension. So that can lead to premature wear, parts breakage. Another issue I was having was, again, when that bolt carrier group is traveling rearward, traditionally you have your hammer here, and the carrier is basically pushing that hammer back, and it's riding along with it, coming back, stripping around, and it's ready to fire again. When you have excess gas at the gas key, basically what was happening is that carrier was coming back so violently that it was hitting the hammer, and it was causing it to bounce back, smacking the disconnector on the trigger, and there was actually some peening on that disconnector, and eventually that would have broken. Additionally, this gun, when I was first testing it with that barrel in this setup, I actually had to replace my gas rings like sub 1,000 rounds. And if you're familiar with AR-15s, that's an extremely short lifespan and is not something that should be happening. Let me think. Oh, the other issue that I was having is, again, that carrier tilt. It was so aggressive that there's actually, and it was minor, but it was still there. The actual lower receiver, the carrier was tilting enough to actually be impacting the lower receiver, so I was starting to get a couple wear marks on that. So anyway, that's what kind of led me down the path of actually going with a Crane Spec barrel. I had heard of them beforehand. I never really tried them. I knew in theory they worked, but again, didn't really want to spend the money until I started seeing that excess wear. So anyway, what we're going to be doing today is I've got, I think, 4 or 5 different types of ammo, 5.56, 223, all kinds of stuff. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be shooting the gun unsuppressed and checking that it cycles properly and that it locks back. And then I'm going to be adding the suppressor and doing the same thing. To be very clear, the Crane Spec barrel, it's really designed to be used suppressed. So the unsuppressed kind of test is just for my own curiosity. I have done it once before with a couple different ammo types, so I'm just going to be doing it again just to kind of confirm. If I get any kind of weird results, I'll run it again and we will go from there. I think that's it. I'll go over kind of the gun, the setup in a little bit here. I know people are always curious about that. But yeah, let's get into it. All right, so first ammo we're going to be using is, this is Winchester M193. I apologize for the lighting, guys. There's not a cloud in the sky, so we're going to be shooting this left-handed just to give you guys kind of hopefully the best view possible. So anyway, it's going to be 5 rounds, Winchester M193, and we will go from there. Alright, so now what we're talking about. So this is Winchester M193. You'll note that it did not lock back on the last round. So just something to note. Like I said, the Crane Spec barrel really designed to be run with the suppressor. This is a perfect example of that. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. That was actually the hottest ammo that I have here. That was at 3180, is I think what the box said. Out of a 10.3, obviously going to be less than that, but worth noting. So let's get to that next ammo. All right, so this is PMC X-Tac. This is their 5.56, so we'll see what this does. All right, so that actually locked back, kind of surprising. That one was rated at 3120, I think is what the box said. So the second hottest ammo that I have in theory, but again, that one did lock back. So now we're gonna go to, this is a Scorpio 223. It's a Czech Republic type ammo. It's 223 though, so we'll see what happens. All right, Scorpio 223. Kind of helps if you chamber around. So that did not cycle and pick up the next round. We'll see if that continues. Looks like it's gonna. All right, so obviously with that one, we did not get locked back, and we also had some feeding issues. So again, perfect example of what that crane spec is gonna do. All right, so I don't know the velocity of that Scorpio stuff. I'm sure you can find it online if you're curious. This is going to be, this is Wolf steel case 223. So in theory, gonna be the weakest stuff, but we'll find out. So that one we had a failure to feed, I believe. Let's find out. Yep. Another failure to feed. And we're empty. So, yep, like I thought. The steel case is going to be the weakest and the most finicky stuff. So obviously I didn't mention it earlier, but kind of inferred, ammo is also going to be quite the limiting factor here in terms of how the gun is going to cycle with this gas port size. So I'm going to throw the suppressor on, and we'll do the same thing. All right, so suppressor on, dead air Sandman. This is going to be that Winchester M193, followed by the PMC X-Tac, then the Scorpio, then the Wolf. Because we had issues with both the Scorpio and the Wolf, I did put 10 rounds in each of those magazines just to get a better sample size. So it's not going to be a completely universal test. If you don't like that, run the test yourself. All right, so Wolf M193. Perfect function, lock back. I think I said Wolf on that. Winchester. This is going to be the PMC X-Tac. Again, perfect function, locked back. No issues there. Let's go to the Scorpio and then the Wolf. All right, Scorpio ammo, 10 rounds, not 5. Let's see what it does. Perfect function, locked back. Again, to reiterate, the crane spec barrel is designed to be run suppressed, so yeah. Wolf. Perfect function, locked back. So yeah, I mean, if it's not obvious at this point, if you have a 10 3-inch gun or you want to build one, or if you have one that's overgassed, this is kind of the solution if you're running a traditional baffle stack suppressor. If you have a standard barrel with a standard gas port, you can mitigate these issues using like a flow-through can, OSS. You know, there's a bunch of them out there nowadays. Or Huxworks. But yeah, anyway, that was kind of the test I wanted to do. I'm gonna load this up some more, do some shooting, and then I'll also show you guys kind of what the gun is as well, like I mentioned. But yeah, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, comments, leave them down below, and I will get to them as soon as I can. Thanks.